A quiet story about someone who never gave up. If you're still awake tonight, quietly waiting for sleep to arrive. Hi. Thank you for spending these last few minutes of your day with me. Tonight, I'd like to share a story with you, not a story of fame or fortune, but one that might make your heart soften just a little, because it reminds us of what people are capable of, even when they've been given almost nothing. The person you'll hear about was born without arms, without legs, no hands to hold on with, no feet to run, to walk, or to stand tall. From the very first cry, his existence felt like a question mark, a challenge to the world itself. Imagine that, please. When most of us are defined by what we can do, he arrived in this life unable to do almost anything. Some people looked at him with pity. Some looked away. One even asked his mother, "Do you want to keep him?" But somehow, from inside that quietly still body, a whole heart kept beating. A heart that never gave up, never lashed out, just kept going, day by day, year by year, trying to live as fully as possible with what little he had. You don't have to believe in miracles tonight, Lee. You don't even need to expect anything from this story. Just let it unfold. Let it take its time. Let it rest with you here, in this quiet moment. And maybe, just maybe, it'll find a place to stay in your heart. Why me? The unspoken question in the delivery room. He was born on a cold, early morning. The lights in the delivery room felt too bright, too sterile, as if even the air itself was holding its breath. When his mother first saw her baby boy, she didn't scream. She didn't speak. She simply turned her face away, not because she didn't love him, but because her heart had no words for what she saw. Her son had been born without arms, without legs. Just a small, round body with a tiny foot curled near his side. There had been no warning during pregnancy, no signs on the scans. No doctor had said anything was wrong. And so when the truth arrived, so sudden, so complete, it shook her to her core. His father entered the room a few minutes later. He stood frozen, staring at his son, his firstborn, who lay there silent and still, so very different. No tears, no shouting, just a thick, quiet heaviness settling over the room like a fog. And beneath that silence, one question pulsed between them. Why him? The months that followed were filled with a strange mix of love and sorrow. They never stopped loving their child, but they had no idea how to raise him. How do you teach a little boy to walk when he has no legs? How do you show him how to write, to feed himself, to hug someone, when there are no arms to reach with? At first, they tried to act like nothing was different. They smiled. They took photos. They introduced him to relatives and friends. But behind closed doors, there were tears. There were long nights of silence. There were moments when his mother would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering, will he ever be able to live on his own? Will anyone ever love him? Will my love be enough? And then there was the boy. Too young to explain what he felt, but old enough to know he wasn't like the others. He saw other children running, jumping, holding their parents' hands, and he sat quietly watching, not jealous, not angry, just wondering. One afternoon, he turned to his mother and asked, "Mom, why don't I have arms and legs like the other kids?" She didn't cry. She didn't panic. She pulled him close, held his small round shoulder gently, and said, "Because you were born to be something different." He didn't understand those words fully, but somehow they stayed with him. And in that moment, something like hope began to grow. He learned to adapt, to use the small foot on his left side to hold a pencil, to press buttons, to move objects. He learned to type with his toes, to roll himself upright when he fell, to balance and pivot using muscles most of us never think twice about. No one taught him how to do these things. There was no manual. We know how to book for a body like his. But deep inside he knew, if I don't figure this out myself, no one else can do it for me. Every morning, in his little sunlit room, he practiced writing, reading, turning pages with his chin, flipping switches with his toes. His mother would often sit nearby, not giving instructions, just being there. One day she asked, "Are you tired, sweetheart?" He shook his head. "No, Mom. I just want to do things like everyone else." She didn't say anything for a moment, then smiled, placed her hand gently on his back, and said, "Then keep going. I'm right here." He never asked for pity. He didn't dream of being normal, but he did dream of one thing, one quiet, impossible wish, to hold his mother's hand, just once. He knew it couldn't happen, but the longing remained. Every night, as he lay still in bed, he imagined it, a small hand wrapped gently around his, the warmth, the safety, the connection, and maybe that dream, soft and silent, was enough. Because while he may never have had arms to hold with, he was slowly learning how to reach out anyway. Not with hands, but with something deeper, with heart. The boy with no limbs, and the dream to hold his mother's hand. There was one thing the boy never spoke aloud. A thought so simple, so quiet, that it almost didn't seem like a dream at all. But for him, it was. He just wanted to hold his mother's hand. Just once. He had no arms, no fingers to curl into hers, but that didn't stop the longing. He would watch other kids in the schoolyard grab their mother's hand at drop-off, tug her forward when they were excited, cling to her when they were scared. And he would just sit there, quietly observing, not sad, not jealous, just wishing. Sometimes, he would sit alone on the living room carpet, his tiny foot tilted against the rug, and imagine what it might feel like. To have a hand, to hold hers. To feel her warmth, not through a blanket or a hug or a kiss on the cheek, but through something small and simple, like fingers intertwined. He didn't need it to prove anything. He didn't want it so others would see. He just wanted to know what it felt like. To be connected, even for a second. His days were filled with adaptation. He learned to use the tiny foot that grew from his left side to do the impossible. Turn on light switches. Hold a fork. Type. Write. At first, nobody believed he could manage such things. But slowly, day by day, he showed them otherwise. He fell, often, and each time, he taught himself how to get back up. Not because it didn't hurt, but because he understood. If I don't learn how to get up, no one will always be there to lift me. In the quiet of his sunlit room, he practiced, balancing, turning pages with his chin, tapping at the keyboard with his toes. His mother would sit nearby, sometimes saying nothing, just being present. Her eyes were often tired, but kind. There was a look on her face that mixed pride with worry. A mother who didn't know what the future held, but refused to let that fear show. One day she asked him, "Are you tired?" "Sweetheart," he shook his head. "No, Mom. I just want to do things like everyone else." She didn't answer right away. She just looked at him, like she wanted to freeze that moment and hold it forever. Then she placed her hand gently on his back and whispered, "Then keep going. I'll be right here." He started school. The first days weren't easy. The stares, the whispered questions, the accidental glances that lasted too long. But over time, something began to change. Not in him, but in them, because he didn't ask for pity. He didn't want special treatment. He just wanted to be seen the same as everyone else. And slowly they did. Not because they forgot what he looked like, but because they started to see what he was made of. Courage, patience, resilience, kindness. Still, on quiet nights, he would sometimes return to that dream, the one no one else knew about. Holding his mother's hand. In his imagination, it felt real, solid, warm. He didn't need it to come true. The dream itself was enough, soft and steady like a candle that never went out. One day, his class was asked to write a short answer to this question. What do you wish for more than anything? He wrote only one sentence. I wish I could hold my mom's hand, just so she knows I'm okay. No one else saw it, except his teacher. She read it silently, then gently placed the paper down, closed her eyes, and said nothing for a long while. Not everyone is born with everything. Some are born missing pieces we take for granted, but sometimes those missing pieces make room for something else, something quieter, something deeper. This boy may never have been able to hold his mother's hand, but in his own way, through effort, courage, and 1,000 small victories, he found another way to reach out. And maybe that was more than enough. He once wanted it all to end, until a single tear saved him. No one would have guessed that a boy who smiled so often had once wanted everything to stop. No one could have imagined that behind all the trying, behind the careful movements, the laughter, the quiet pride in learning to do things on his own, was a tired heart, weighed down by something he couldn't quite name. He reached adolescence like most kids, confused, curious, and full of emotions he didn't yet understand. But for him, it came with a heavier shadow. His classmates were growing. They started dating. They played sports. They dreamed about road trips and driver's licenses, part-time jobs and Friday night games. And him, he sat on the sidelines. Not because he wanted to, but because his body didn't give him a choice. One day during gym class, teams were being picked for basketball. A boy glanced his way and said, not unkindly, just plainly, "What What's he gonna do? Better just let him watch. It wasn't meant to hurt. But sometimes, the truth stings deeper than cruelty ever could. That night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Not crying. Not angry. Just tired. Tired of trying harder than everyone else. Tired of pretending it didn't bother him. Tired of being the kid everyone admired from a distance. Inside, questions started to form. What's the point of all this? Would anyone even notice if I stopped trying? If I stopped being here? He didn't think those thoughts out of anger. There was no bitterness in his heart, just emptiness. A quiet ache that settled in deeper with each unanswered question. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, he slipped quietly into the bathroom. He sat in front of the mirror, and for the first time, he really looked at himself. No arms, no legs, no future he could clearly picture. No reason that made sense to keep going. He imagined what it would be like to just disappear. No pain, no explanations, just silence. Then, a sound, soft, familiar, the creak of his mother's bedroom door. The faint shuffle of her slippers in the hallway. She didn't come into the bathroom. She didn't see him sitting there. But in that moment, his imagination painted a picture far more vivid than the mirror in front of him. He imagined her waking up one morning and not finding him there. The look on her face, the silence in the kitchen, the unanswered questions, the H she would carry forever. And just like that, a tear fell, only one. But it was enough. He whispered into the dark, if she still needs me, maybe I'll stay. He didn't tell anyone about that night. But something in him shifted. He didn't suddenly feel okay. But for the first time, he wasn't living just for himself. He was living for her. For the father who pushed his wheelchair without a word. For the little brother who called him a hero, even though they'd never kicked the soccer ball together. The next time someone asked him, "Do you think you'll ever be able to do something big in life?" he simply said, "I don't know, but I'll try." Later that year, his class was given a writing prompting. If you could give one piece of advice to the world, what would it be? He wrote, "If you don't have arms to hold others, then open your heart instead." The teacher read his essay out loud. No one laughed. No one pitied him. They just listened, quietly. Like something sacred was being shared. And from that moment on, his story started to take a new path. Not because he had all the answers. Not because he suddenly felt whole. But because he realized he didn't need to be whole to help someone else heal. Somewhere deep inside him, a quiet truth settled in. I don't need perfect hands to make an impact. I don't need strong legs to move someone's heart. Maybe I don't need anything more than this, a voice, a heart, and the courage to keep showing up. The first time he spoke, while sitting in a world that stood above him, the gymnasium smelled like dust and pencils. A faint echo of morning announcements still hung in the air. Students were slouched in metal chairs, whispering, fidgeting, waiting for the assembly to end. And then someone called his name. It was the principal, calm, warm, encouraging, inviting him forward to share a few words with the school. He hesitated, not because he didn't want to speak, but because it would be his first time. His first time talking in front of a crowd. His first time rolling his wheelchair past rows of classmates, past their staring eyes and hushed wonder. No stage, no podium, no height to meet them at eye level. Just him, sitting, small, quiet, but with a heart full of things waiting to be said. He didn't bring a paper, no notes, no rehearsed lines. He just started from the beginning. He told them about a little boy who once wished for just one thing in the world, to hold his mother's hand. He spoke about the nights he cried silently, the afternoons he watched other kids running, playing, holding on to people while he sat still. He told them how he once wanted to disappear, how he nearly did, and how a single tear, born not from pain but from love, had kept him here. The room was silent. Even the ones who always talked through assemblies had gone still. No one looked away. Some lowered their heads. Others blinked fast to hold something back. And when he finished, he didn't ask for applause. He simply said, "If you're ever feeling alone, maybe just remember someone else already understands." Later that day, a girl from class stopped him in the hallway. She didn't say much, just this, "Thank you. I was planning something I don't think I want to plan anymore." He didn't ask what she meant. He just nodded. And for the first time, he realized that maybe his voice didn't have to be loud to be heard. Maybe it just needed to be real. From that day on, little invitations started coming in. A youth group, a church, a college gathering, a weekend retreat. They asked him to share, to tell the story, to just be there. Each time he rolled forward in front of a new crowd, the nerves were still there. He still wondered if people only saw his body, the absence of limbs, the way he moved. But something always happened, always. Within a few minutes, the attention shifted, from how he looked to how he made people feel. And once that happened, walls came down. People stopped hiding, stopped pretending, started listening, started crying. And sometimes they smiled through tears. One boy, maybe 15, came up to him once after a talk. His voice cracked. He said, "I thought you were going to be some superhero or something. But you're just like me. And if you can smile, then I think maybe I can try." Those were the moments that stayed. Not the claps, not the cameras, but the way people softened, the way their shoulders dropped, the way their pain found permission to speak. He never called himself a speaker, never a motivator, never a leader. He just shared and hoped someone would hear something they needed in the silence between the words. That first time he spoke, he didn't feel brave. He felt small, nervous, a little lost. But as he sat there, voice trembling, eyes scanning a sea of faces, he didn't see judgment. He saw something else. He saw people who were tired, people who were hurting, people who needed someone, not to fix things, but to say, "Me too." And from that day on, he began to believe, maybe I don't need legs to stand tall. Maybe I don't need arms to reach people. Maybe I just need to be willing to show up and tell the truth. Steps without feet and stages filled with tears. There were no footsteps on the stage when he entered. No echo of shoes across wooden floors. No tall figure commanding the spotlight. Just a quiet roll of wheels and a young man in a small chair, carrying something far heavier than his body ever could. His journey into speaking didn't begin with ambition. It wasn't a dream. It just happened. First, it was a classroom, then a youth group, then a local church, then a college club. At every stop, he spoke softly. He didn't shout. He didn't raise his voice, but people listened. Because what he shared didn't come from a script. It came from the places inside him that had been broken and had healed slowly, without fanfare. He never hid the hard parts. He told them about the time he almost gave up, the loneliness, the quiet dreams that hurt to even say out loud, like wanting to hold his mother's hand, like wondering if anyone would ever love him, not out of pity, but because they truly saw him. He didn't try to impress. He tried to be real, and that was what people needed more than anything. After one high school assembly, a girl approached the stage. Tears in her eyes, her voice barely a whisper. She hugged him gently, so carefully, as if afraid she'd break the moment, and said, "I've never told anyone this, but I've wanted to disappear too. You made me want to stay." That was the magic no one could explain. Not in words, not in statistics. Just in quiet moments like that, when two stories met and changed each other forever. Soon, the invitations grew. Not because he became famous, but because word spread. People didn't remember his name, but they remembered how he made them feel. He didn't need stages. He didn't need lights. He just needed a room and someone willing to listen. And every time, no matter where he spoke, something happened, people cried. Not because his life was sad, but because in his story, they saw their own pain reflected, held gently, and accepted. At a large conference once, he sat before a crowd of over 2,000. They'd flown him in, dressed him in a microphone headset, offered him applause before he even began. But when he rolled into the center of the stage, he asked just one question. "Have you ever felt like a burden?" No one raised their hand, but many looked down. And then he told them how he once believed that's all he was. A burden to his parents, a complication for teachers, a silent weight in every room. He didn't tell it dramatically. He just told it. And when he finished, the room stayed quiet. Not because they didn't care, but because they did. Then a standing ovation. But it wasn't for his bravery, or for his strength. It was for what he gave them permission to feel, and a reason to hope. After that talk, a man from the audience approached him. Middle-aged, tired eyes, he said, "I buried my son last year. I didn't think I could feel anything again. But listening to you, I remembered what love felt like." They didn't hug. They didn't exchange emails. Just a nod, a hand on his shoulder, and a silence that said more than words ever could. He spoke in prisons, hospitals, shelters, corporate offices. He spoke to teenagers and to people twice his age. To those who had lost limbs and to those who had simply lost hope. And no matter where he was, whether the stage was big or small, the message stayed the same: you matter. Even when you feel invisible. Even when you feel like too much. Even when you've been told you'll never be enough. Once, after a long day of speaking, he sat alone in a hotel room. He looked in the mirror. Same reflection. Same body he used to resent. But this time, he saw peace. Because somehow, without taking a single step, he had walked into people's hearts and stayed. And that, to him, was enough. When a man without arms held his son for the first time, no one teaches you how to be a father when you have no arms. No manual, no YouTube tutorial, no book titled Parenting when you can't pick up your child. And yet, when his son was born, he didn't feel unprepared. He felt ready. Ready in the way that love makes you ready, not by giving you all the answers, but by reminding you that the questions no longer matter. The day his son arrived, the delivery room filled with soft light and held breath. The baby cried first, then the mother, and then, quietly, the father. Not out of fear, not because of memories, but because in that moment, everything he once thought he'd never have was suddenly real. When the nurse asked, "Would you like to hold him?" he nodded, tearful. They wrapped the newborn gently, positioned him carefully across the father's lap and shoulder, supporting his tiny body with pillows. And there they were, father and son, face to face, breath to breath, no arms, no hands. But in that stillness, everything was whole. He had once believed that, without arms, he would never be able to comfort a child. Without legs, he wouldn't be able to walk beside him, chase him in the park, carry him on tired nights. But love has always known how to stretch itself beyond the body. He couldn't rock his son to sleep with motion, so he did it with his voice, with songs, with stories, with presence, and somehow it was enough. He told bedtime tales not about superheroes, but about a little boy who once thought he'd never belong, until he learned to belong to himself. His son would curl up against him, one hand resting on the side of his chest, and ask questions only children dare to ask you. "Dad, how come you don't have arms? How do you do so many things anyway?" He'd smile and say, "Because I have you, and you are my hands." His son didn't fully understand, but from that night on, he started doing small things for his dad, turning on light switches, opening doors, wrapping a blanket over his legs. Little things, ordinary things, but to a father like him, they were miracles. He didn't want to be a perfect dad. He just wanted to be a present one. He watched his son learn how to walk, learn how to fall, learn how to try again. And each time his son stumbled, he didn't rush in with his body. He offered something better. The voice that had learned to rise even when the body couldn't. It's okay. Every time we fall, we get better at getting up. It was the same thing he had once whispered to himself, alone in a quiet room. Now, he gave it away like a gift. His family wasn't picture perfect, but it was real, soft, sacred. His wife walked beside him, sometimes literally helping him through crowds, but never treating him as less. His son didn't grow up wondering what was missing. He grew up surrounded by what mattered most. Unspoken strength, unconditional presence, a kind of love that didn't need hands to hold him. Late one night, after the house had gone still, he sat in the dark, listening to the soft breathing of his son down the hall. He whispered into the quiet, "Thank you for letting me stay, for giving me a reason to be here." No one heard it, but the words stayed in the room like a prayer that didn't need an answer. He didn't need a different body anymore. he didn't need more, because he finally knew he was enough. If someone had asked him years ago, can a man with no arms or legs really be a father? He would have smiled and said, yes. Because love doesn't live in the limbs. It lives in the space where you choose to show up, again and again. And that's exactly what he did. If you're tired tonight, let him whisper this to you before you sleep. If you're still awake right now, thank you for being here, for listening, for staying with this story all the way to the quiet end. Tonight, you didn't just hear about someone remarkable, but you walked alongside him through hospital rooms, schoolyards, lonely bathrooms, and crowded stages. You heard about a boy who never got to hold his mother's hand, about a teenager who once wanted to disappear, about a man who became a father without ever lifting his arms. And through it all, he stayed. Not to prove anything, not to be inspirational, but simply because something in him refused to give up. He kept showing up, with his voice, his presence, his heart. And maybe that's more powerful than anything hands or feet could ever do. If you're tired tonight, mentally, emotionally, soul deep tired, please know this. You don't need to be perfect to matter. You don't need to be strong all the time. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to stay. Stay one more moment. Stay for one more breath. Stay for one more sunrise. Because somewhere in the world, there was a person who once thought he had nothing. And he became someone who helped others find everything they'd lost inside themselves. Not because he had answers, but because he told the truth. Now maybe you're wondering, who was he? What's his name? Have I seen him before? Maybe not, but maybe that's not the point. Maybe what matters more is which part of his story spoke to you. Was it the quiet dream of holding someone's hand? The tear that stopped him from giving up? The stage he rolled onto while the world stood above him? Whatever it was, I hope you carry that with you tonight. Not as a lesson, not as advice, just as a whisper. You are not alone. And now, if you'd like, I invite you to share in the stillness. Who do you think he was? What part of his story stayed with you? What did it remind you of in your own life? If this story meant something to you, maybe leave a comment or share a line that spoke to your heart. There's someone out there tonight who might need to hear that, too. Sleep well now. You've made it through today. You're doing better than you think. And you, just as you are enough. Good night.